Dani, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
In my work as a financial educator, when I'm trying to get people over their fear of investing, get them a little bit more comfortable with the concept, I have a couple of go to methods or illustrations.
Okay.
One, I always fall back on the compound interest thing. So, for example, if you take round numbers, if you invest $9,000, let's say, and you invest that for 30 years, that's 270,000 in round numbers dollars that you would invest. But at a 7% rate of return, you'd actually have $1 million. So 275,000 invested, you'd have roughly $1 million. That's one of my go-to illustrations. The other rotates around inflation risk. And when people talk about risk, there are a couple of risks. There is a risk of losing your investment going down in value.
Yeah.
But if you don't invest, there's also a risk that your dollars aren't going to keep up with inflation. So the purchasing power of that dollar that you just decided to put into a savings account is going to decrease over the amount of time because it's not keeping up with inflation. So those are my two go-to bang ways of dealing with it. You are a PhD in finance. I'd really be interested in hearing how you address that question.
Okay. For me, it starts, let's say, one step before yours. And it's actually to person to understand its own finance, to know how much I earn, how much I spend, is there something left over? First is to have, I call it like money snapshot, my situation today with my finance. And then if we see there are some problems where usually there are many problems in it, because if you don't pay attention to it, money just goes away. Then first we need to see what we need to correct in order to have some money left at the end of the month. Or how I like to suggest to people, I'm not the person that is like, let's budget every euro, every coffee, everything. I don't like that. Like, it's not how I live and it's not what I teach. My approach is tiny bit different. It is the moment I get salary, 20% needs to go on a side because I cannot get compound interest. I cannot have anything if there is no money with which I can work. So my approach is 20% goes on a side. We build two things. One is emergency fund. Usually many people don't have it, believe it or not, but they don't have emergency fund. First thing is emergency fund, and second thing is brokerage or investment or retirement plan for investing. And then suggestions goes, okay, month one, instead of now spending, let's say, a year to build emergency fund, let's start immediately dividing 50% of that 20%, right? Let's say someone has salary 1,000 euro, just to be clear, 200 euro per month needs to be put on aside. If there is no emergency fund, it goes 100 euro in emergency, 100 in investing. In the moment we finish emergency fund, 200 euro goes to investing per month. And this emergency fund, it shouldn't be cash at the home, it shouldn't be cash on any banking account. It needs to be in a high yield saving account because we also don't want to lose money by having cash on the account. We want it still to grow. And then we search what, depending on which country person is, which bank or institution offers the best solution. So usually now in Europe you can find 2% interest rate, in US they're like 4% accounts, so that even this emergency fund grows in value. And then we come to what you said,
Okay.
investing,
Okay.
and actually explaining. For me, this is really important that people need to understand if you don't invest money, you're losing. And that's what you mentioned, inflation. I take an example, I don't know, earpods. Now they're 100 euro and I can buy them. But next year, they're going to be 150, but my 100 euro is going to remain same if I save them. So I'm not going to be able to buy them. And that is the importance with disinflation. We cannot allow ourselves not to invest money. And even if we save money, we cannot allow ourselves not to keep it on a high yield saving account.
That is a great point. And just to level set the conversation, you are in Europe. Your go to for those illustrations was euros. I was in Europe for the first time a couple of years ago. Euros, dollars, at least at that time, the value was roughly the same. But again, you're currently, I believe, in Germany. So just to level set the conversation there.
Yes. Why euro is an example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what I like about your example and the way you stated things is my question started out with how do you address people's fear of investing? And I think the way you laid it out is one of the fears is I don't have enough to invest. So the way that you walk through that before you even address the fears of, oh, I don't want to take risk, you're saying you're addressing that primary thing that I don't have enough to invest. So when you're working with someone and they're still hung up on that part of it is, yeah, I don't have a lot to invest, so what's the point? They go through it and it's, I'm so far behind, I should have been investing decades ago. Yeah, thank you for walking me through this illustration, but it only shows I have this much to invest, and that's not going to get me to retirement or get me to whatever my goal is. How do you deconstruct the conversation from there?
So it depends how old the person is. But I say when we are young, we have more time, less money. The older we are, we have less time for compounding, but we have more money to invest. So it doesn't matter at what age you are. The point is, if you're younger, you can start with less money. If you're in, like, I don't know, your 40s or 50s, it still makes sense, but maybe your contribution should be increased if you have less time, let's say, towards like the retirement. So my advice is always to start. It really doesn't matter how much, 20 euro, 20 euro. But once you start and once you see a slowly increase in the value, you start being motivated to do it. Or maybe what is really important that maybe some people miss is to have a goal. You need to have a goal while you're doing that. If I come to you like, I invest money for this, and you're like, I don't think about it. Many people nowadays, I need to say, they don't think about pension. If I'm 20 years old, am I going really to think, am I really going to convince 20 years old girl that it's important she gets money when she's 65? Not really. But maybe her goal is going to be to buy a car, to buy a house, maybe to, I don't know, travel the world, maybe to retire earlier. There are like many different possibilities, but I can say it's never bad to have money. Like, independent how old you are, extra money is never bad idea.
So, particularly for that younger person that maybe retirement is such a far off thing, even if they're going to worry about it in the back of their mind, they're going, ah, I'll worry about that later. I've got more pressing things to worry about right now. Is one strategy perhaps using those more near term goals to demonstrate the power of investing? So it's going to be 30 years before you retire or 40 years before you retire. But in the next 10 years, you may want to purchase a home or something like that. Something that is far enough out in time where it's investable. Because generally speaking, if you've got a goal that's 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years away, conventional wisdom says that's not an investable situation. That's more of a savable situation because of the volatility of the markets.
Yes.
But if you have more of those intermediate term goals, is that a way to get maybe a way to get interested in investing and then buy into it? And then to your point, as you see that investment growing, it gives you more confidence and a little bit more foresight for those things that are further out.
So there are a few options. One is when someone is really young, I really advise to start with something little that you don't feel. Like 20 or 50 euro dollars a month. If you have some, let's say, just normal salary, it's not something you really feel. So I would advise just Start with 20, 50. Just start. Let it grow without thinking about it. Make automatizates transfer from your account to the investment account. Don't think and literally forget about it. And then usually people are like, yeah, why not? It's not that I'm going to feel it. So to start with the sum of money that doesn't change a person's life is a good motivation. Second one, nowadays a lot of people like to have 3 months off, 6 months off, not to work, to travel the world. So then when you talk with a person, you try to see which goals or aspiration that person has. Maybe he really wants to go 1 year to travel around the world and to have enough money. Then you say, okay, let's start building for that. Why not? If girl or woman are in their 30s or I don't know, 20, 30s, and they have a kid, building a trust fund for kid is the best present you can give to your child. I know that in US there is like a big topic about the student loans, but if you have a child and for 18 years you're building the trust fund for that kid can study whatever wants at the age of 18 if you were consistent for 18 years. So everyone is different. So start small, see what the person has as a goals as I know, travel the world, buy a house, develop trust fund for kids. They're like, as I said, having money is never a bad option. It's just important to see what triggers a certain person, why that person wants to have it. Usually it's always, let's say, possibility of freedom,
Yeah.
choice to.
And I notice in the way you're describing this, it's much more of a balanced approach than I've heard talking with others, because there is this mindset of I need to deprive myself until I get to a certain point. So I need to throw all of my resources into getting out of debt or saving for retirement. I need to put all of my effort into those type of things, as opposed to thinking about that trip that I may want to take in 2 years, that type of thing. And that works for some people. Some people are just so money nerdish, like myself, that they will buy off on the deprivation part. But there are a lot of people that's a non-starter. They need to have a little bit more view of this as being a balanced thing, where I'm preparing for my goals, but I'm not sacrificing life in the present in order to do.
Exactly. For me, as you said, there are many people out there and everyone has its own lifestyle. My personal I want to live this life. I don't want just to save as much as possible so I have money on the account. It's beautiful who can and who wants. For me, also this present moment is really precious. I want today also to go and buy, I don't know, to buy that bag, to go on that trip. So I don't want, I'm not saying you should go and spend all your money. No. But at least I don't have that guilt feeling. I know every month I'm investing money. I know I did my investments and I don't have the guilt when I spend money. But this is my mindset. I support everyone who has different. I personally like to enjoy life. And for me, just having more money on the account is not something. Some people feel safe when they see they have 1 million in their bank account. They feel relieved and they're fine to have maybe less in that moment, maybe I don't know, not that great car or I don't know, but everyone needs to find what works for him or her. That is really important. We really need to find out what we want and to be aware that if we want to achieve something there's certain sacrifice to do. So it's really balance.
I'm preparing right now for a seminar that I'm teaching on Tuesdays for a few weeks. And we're going to go into investing like this Tuesday. So
Okay.
I've been refreshing myself on my approach. There's this concept that at least is very popular in the personal finance world here, called the 50-30-20 rule. And I don't know if that's an American thing or whether or not that's a worldwide thing. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's like a most common budgeting rule. And out of that principle, I took 20%, right? But this 50 and 30, I left on the side. Because, for example, look,
Yeah, and for the listener, the whole idea of the 50-30-20 rule is they're budgeting percentages. So the whole idea is they're money management principles, actually. So 50% of your after tax dollars should go to your needs, 30% should go to your wants, and 20% should go to savings. I actually actually released an episode where we touched on investing last week with a couple of gentlemen who use that, but they invert the 30 and the 20. So they call it the 50/20/30 rule, simply because that whole idea of putting savings at the end, a lot of people, most of us, let's be honest, if we literally approach it in that order, 50% to our needs, 30% to our wants, it's going to be hard to get to that 20% for savings. So they invert that just to make that point. But again, you lean more towards the 20 as opposed to the 50 and the 30.
Exactly. So in general, I give to clients suggestion this is how it goes, but I always highlight it's a best case book scenario. And if your finance is not like that, don't worry, mine are not neither like
Right,
that. I cannot say I live 50, 30, 20. What I can say, what I do, and which for me works perfectly, is 20.
right.
20% goes directly. I don't think about it. And I think it's really easy way. I cannot even call it budgeting if I'm doing it that way. But it works for me. People need to find their own way. It's important that, for example, when I was younger, I would used to go really negative in my card because I was spending more than I was earning. So the important thing is not to go red and to invest 20%. Or let's say saving investing, which I said, like emergency fund and the investing account, because whatever happens, like I know you in US, you have a really short, how you call it, the periods when people can lose a job. You have 3 weeks or something like that, the cancellation period,
Yeah,
or
yeah, and that's up to the employer, but different employers have different levels of severance they give you, and then there's also unemployment. Yeah.
and then, okay, if you already know that the situation can happen, you know that this market is more flexible because in Europe, we have 3 months notion period. So you
Well,
have
let me make sure I understand that. So that's 3 months that the government will support you after losing a job, or
when if employee say don't come anymore for the
oh,
work, I
oh,
don't.
okay, okay. So the employer provides that, and
Yes,
and,
three
and
months.
but that's more or less a standard. Here, we don't
Yes,
really we don't really have a standard, which can be scary. So sorry, go ahead.
exactly. That's why this emergency fund is really important. If tomorrow you don't have a job, can you be fine? Do you have money for your expenses? It's really important because today I read that one of the top reasons for divorce is money communication,
Mhm.
different views and values on money, especially if one partner is just responsible for the family, besides communication. So, two things the reasons for divorce money and, sorry, views on the money, and communication between the partners. It just shows the importance of money in anyone's lives. And to become financially literate, it's now important, I would say, more than ever because knowledge is available.
Yeah, and that leads to a question that I also get on a frequent basis. So the average person is going to need to enlist some type of professional when they decide they're going to invest. A couple of questions around that. What's your opinion on how much an individual needs to know when before they go to a professional? Because the thing about going to a professional, if you genuinely have no knowledge on the subject, you're basically going to this person and opening your financial life up to them and saying, hey, you take care of this, I don't understand this, you take care of it.
Mhm.
In order to approach that in the most intelligent fashion as possible and the most knowledgeable way as possible, how much do you think an individual needs to know or be educated about investing, personal finance in general before they enlist that professional?
So I can totally say my approach is usually always to educate. And in that way, a person can make decision or can double check the advice of financial advisors. Once you have knowledge, the world is yours. And you can really confront that advisor and say, okay, you suggested me this. I always like to see what's going on in the market, and I contacted one broker to see what they would suggest me. And they suggested me one ETF about sustainability. And I was like, why? Oh, everything is now sustainable energy. I was like, okay. And I started thinking about it. Sustainable energy, this is just my opinion, not financial advice. For my opinion, it's a beautiful thing. It's where the world is evolving. But besides that, we live in the world where energy is so needed that there is no wind or water that can produce the amount of energy we need, right? So, for my personal opinion, sustainable energy ETF is not something I want to invest just because it sounds cool. Because I don't think that it can really provide what we need in the future with the whole development of the computers, data centers, AI, everything. Energy needs to be produced differently. So once someone suggests you something, you should really double check it if it resonates with what you believe. And I have a big rule: don't invest if you don't understand what it is. It saves you so much time. If you really don't know what it is, don't invest. How to know when to go to advisor? I think they really need to educate themselves. I think online, on YouTube's books, finding coaches or mentors like you and me can help them so much in their journey, save them. If they want, there is free resources. If they want mentors, they're paid solutions. So it's so easy to get educated. You just need to decide which journey is yours. But just going to advisor and then just take whatever they advise is still better than doing nothing.
But at least again, here in America, a standard understanding, and maybe it's a stereotype or maybe it's not, but if you have to take your car to a auto repair shop, that generically men get a little bit more respect in that situation than women because they assume that women don't know as much about cars.
Mhm.
And some will try to take advantage of that situation and just give these
Mm.
preposterous, you have to spend $5,000 because of this, that, and the other. That doesn't even make any sense. And they try to pull those things on women. They don't get me wrong, they try to pull it on everybody, but they're more
Yeah.
willing to try to pull it on women. And for me, and my wife will usually call me about these things because I am no expert about cars. Don't get me wrong, but I know the basics of how a car works. So if a car is behaving in a way where it indicates that there is a gas flow issue somewhere in the car, and the mechanic is telling me or telling my wife there's a problem with the electrical system, I know enough to know I need to get away from that person as quickly as possible. So
Okay.
I think that is the challenge for us as consumers of financial products. We don't have to know everything, we don't have to be investment experts, but to know a certain level of basics just to be able to vet what's going on and also make decisions for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, an advisor is going to advise, and you have to be able to be comfortable with the choices being made,
Yeah.
not based on the fact that, okay, I trust you, but okay, yeah, I trust you, but yet I follow what you're saying. You brought up specifically in your example ETFs. So
Yep.
again, for maybe new listeners or listeners who are just starting out their journey, explain the concept of an ETF.
So ETFs, shortly, it's abbreviation of exchange traded funds. What does it mean? It's like a fund that invests in multiple companies at the same time. You can choose broad ETF that follows, let's say, 500 best companies in US. It's like that is following S&P 500 index, or you can choose index that is following just the technology sector, like the 100 biggest technological companies, or you can choose the ETF that is following the whole world, or that is covering just emerging markets or just developing countries. It's the most diversified instrument you can buy, and at the same time you have access to many companies at the lowest possible risk because it's diversified, so it's spread across the performance of all those companies. And for beginners and for long term planning, is the best thing a person can do. I personally, for my long term planning, I have three ETFs that are diversified across the world, and I'm fine. If the whole world goes bad, my portfolio goes bad too. So it's important to understand that it doesn't mean there is no risk. Risk exists, but the only risk you are taking is market risk, meaning everything that is happening to the whole market happens to you.
And from a level of sophistication in terms of how much you need to understand, if you are an ETF investor, and I also at least hear a mutual fund still available, which is basically the same thing. We won't get into the differences there, but both of those vehicles allow you diversification in purchasing a single product. So yeah, I don't have to be intelligent enough, even if I choose not to invest in an index, because you can invest in indexes, or you can invest in funds that are a little bit more focused, and there's a little bit more of the guy who manages it. They're doing the buying and selling and making the decisions on what they're going to buy. So you don't need to have the knowledge that person has, because for the fee that is included in what you're paying for that fund, you're not only getting access to a bunch of stocks, you're also getting access to a person who's going to manage that for you. So all that's being taken care of for you when you buy an ETF. So all of a sudden, your decision is not, do I need to buy this? Do I need to buy that? Do I need to buy the other? It's really more of an understanding of, I have an ETF that is responsible for playing this part of my portfolio. So maybe it's invested aggressively in the US stock market. I have another that is invested more worldwide. I have a third that's not invested in stocks at all. It's invested in bonds. Bonds are usually considered to be a safer, or at least a diversified way of investing, where I'm not all investing in the market risk of the market that I'm investing in. It's just a way of diversifying. We won't get into explaining that on this episode. But the point is, I really have to make decisions more on that macro level, and I'm making basically decision on how much risk I want to take. There's information out there that anybody can read as far as asset allocations and understanding how to build a portfolio. I want 30% and 40% of that. That takes a lot less knowledge. And if you're just going into that conversation, if you choose to enlist a professional, if you're just going into that conversation, just having a basic idea of what you're comfortable with in terms of that allocation, just from research that you've done, then all of a sudden you're going into that with more control than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's great what you said. Before they go, just to have tiny bit more knowledge about how the world works. Short about ETFs and mutual funds. ETFs have much lower costs because they can actually follow one specific index. You pay 0.09% yearly, so it's really low. While mutual funds that are like trying to beat the market, you have a bit higher costs. There are so many options, really so many options. And like you mentioned, everything according to your risk appetite. If you want to be on a safe side, you go with the government bonds. I was thinking lately about the government bonds, and okay, you get, let's say, 3% return on a government bond. And on your principal, in 20, 30 years, with this inflation rate, I'm not really sure how you end up. It seems, even with those interest rates, that at the end, you don't add up much more than what you invested with government bonds at this moment. If I can get 4% on my savings account, why would I buy government bonds?
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that bonds in general have underperformed the market for so long, it's made people ask that question. And again, here in the US, it's fortunate that the bond market in general is starting to turn a bit. So that helps people in terms of their diversification. So, Dani, I really appreciate your time today. We've talked about the importance of education on
Yes.
investing. That's a topic that we cover on this podcast. It's a topic as a financial educator I cover along with any other topics. It's a topic, though, that you really focus on. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell the folks listening or inform them about the ways that you go about educating and how they can further follow you or connect with the work you're doing as a financial educator.
Thank you. So, my approach is actually helping beginners, and I need to say women, because there is such a huge amount of women out there that didn't start to invest. And for me, as one of them, like as a woman, it seems really, I'm gonna say sad, but like I don't see reason for that statistic, let's put that way, because there is nothing complicated or nothing impossible for us not to invest the same way as men. So I decided to focus a bit towards women. And my approach is that I work with person one on one, so that we go through every single aspect, anything that is not understandable, that there are like some gaps in knowledge, we cover everything. So when that person opens broker account, she feels safe and she feels well and she sleep peacefully knowing the decisions she made were informed decision. That is really important. Like when you make decisions of investing, let them just be informed. You can make losses, everything can happen, just make it based on information. You can find me on Instagram. That's the best way to approach me. You can see like I try to be there consistent with the content and to try to provide always good materials and to answer the questions that they often get asked. You can contact me in DM, and that's the best way to start.
All right, excellent. And we'll have links to all of those resources in the show notes. And again, we talked before hitting record that from a social media perspective, Instagram is the place to find you. We'll also have a link to your website. So, Danny, again, I want to appreciate you. I want to just tell you thanks for your time. And again, as more of a broadly based financial educator, I believe education on investing is so important for us to understand because again, it's an area that there are plenty of people out there who just tell me, "Oh, just hand your accounts over to me, let me worry about that." So in that way, it's different than yeah, getting rid of your debt or starting a budget, that kind of thing. And it's one of those things where you interface with professionals, but you need to know exactly what you're getting into. And the fact that you focus on that for investing for beginners and most pointedly women is just awesome. Keep up the good work. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy having this conversation. If I can just add one thing for the
Go
end
for it.
is tomorrow, and let's say you listen to that advice, a financial advisor, and your performance go down, is at the end your money. An advisor going to say, "Ah, sorry, is the market, is political situation, is the war, is this?"
Yes.
Can be true,
Yes.
but it's the best if you can make decision about your money, not someone else.
Yes. They will say read the fine print. Past performance is no indication of future performance, and away they go. So that's why we need to understand. Thanks.